Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to E-fluence 2020. This is a virtual conference on water and wastewater organized by the Philippine Young Water Professionals, or PIPE, as we fondly call it. My name is Yang Villa, the co-founder of the PIPE, and I will be your host for this afternoon's affair. I hope that everyone is keeping well and staying safe during this quarantine situation, and we'd love to hear from you. Please type in the Facebook live chat where you are currently located, and we'd be happy to hear your comments and questions throughout this live stream as well. Now, before we jump onto the program, just a few reminders. We will be posting the details of how to receive a certificate of attendance in the description of this video. You will find that after the live stream. You will find this video posted on both the Facebook page of PIPE as well as our YouTube channel. And at any time you have any questions, please type them in the Facebook live chat. And again, we'd love to hear where you are currently located as well. And I can see that we've got a number of people already joining in to the Facebook live stream. You can rewatch this stream at any time on demand, both at the PIPE page and our YouTube channel. Please hit subscribe so you can be updated for latest content from PIPE. And as a reminder, this E-fluence program is part 1, and we'll have another next Saturday. That's July the 4th at 1 p.m. Manila time. Right, so we've got a full agenda and program for you in the next couple of hours. We will start with opening remarks from Ryan De Soto, and then we will hear from the International Water Association Strategic Programs Manager, Catherine Cross. We will then proceed with 4 research presentations from JC Herrera, Rafael King Ramos, Marc Sinan Azotea, and Eduardo Bornilla Jr. After that, we'll hear the synthesis of Melvin Solomon. And finally, we will hear from Chris Katang-Katang for his closing remarks. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce Ryan, who will be delivering the opening remarks. Ryan is currently a PhD candidate in the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department of the National University of Singapore. His PhD work is on a novel wastewater treatment configuration that reduces energy consumption for the treatment of domestic wastewater. His postdoctoral research fellowship will be in synthetic biology, where he would venture into an emerging field that would allow him to use bioengineered organisms for various applications such as environmental remediation and wastewater treatment. Ryan is the Director for International Community of PIPE and is the Program Manager for E-fluence 2020. Ryan?
Thanks, Yang. Hi, everyone. Hello.
Great. Yeah, please go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Hope you guys are doing well and are staying healthy back home. So here in Singapore, we actually just ended our 2-month lockdown, and I'm very happy we already did. I missed socializing and being able to dine out with friends, and it's probably the first time that I've not gone to the laboratory for that long. So anyway, I would like to thank you all for joining us today on our first virtual conference, and we are very thankful to have presenters who are willing to share their work, albeit virtually. So this year, I was supposed to go to Denmark to present my PhD work for the World Water Congress, but it was postponed to 2021. This was when I thought of E-fluence. So due to the inability to travel out and to physically attend conferences during this COVID-19 pandemic, the Philippine Young Water Professionals has thought of an activity that will allow those who are in the water industry to still be able to share what you have been up to with their peers in the community. So E-fluence is an online knowledge sharing platform that aims to be an avenue for researchers to present their work on water and wastewater. We also want individuals in the academic and professional sectors to have a network of water champions for future collaborations. In the long run, even when this pandemic is over, we'd like to reach out to those who are not able to attend conferences physically due to financial or some other reasons. So for the first E-fluence session today, the theme of the presentations is about water resources. We are very fortunate to have Ms. Catherine from the International Water Association, who will give us a short message for today's event. Catherine leads the IWA strategic programs, which aims to create a process to stimulate innovation and facilitate content from members to support IWA's vision of a water-wise world. She also leads the future, which focuses on enabling water utilities, cities, and industries to be active water stewards in their watersheds. She has a technical background in water resources and environmental management and has worked across Asia Pacific, Africa, Europe, South America, North America, with NGOs, government, and private sectors. So let us all welcome Ms. Catherine for her message.
Thank you, Ryan. And thank you to the conference organizers for inviting me today. It's a great opportunity to share research and knowledge, and I think this format in these times is also a good representation of the rapid adaptability of IWA young water professionals. So it's great to see this event happening. So I'll be speaking today about water resource management in the context of connection between urban areas and their wider watersheds, and what IWA is doing in this space, and how you can engage through your activities and through your research. So to start off with is a quote from the former Secretary General of the UN, Ban Ki-moon, who stated that the battle for sustainability will be lost or won in cities. So what this means is many of the challenges that we face today impact the cities where most of us live, including our water and sanitation services. And these challenges include, of course, as we know, most of us are living in cities, and that's increasing all the time, climate change, population growth, and then also increased competition between different users. And with these challenges, there is a tendency for potential uncoordinated use of water and land resources. And if this happens, it can lead to negative impacts on urban areas, as well as the water that we rely on from those areas. So to look at these challenges and pressures, it highlights the need for more sustainable urban planning and public services. And at the same time, linkages between urban and rural areas need to be strengthened by building on economic, social, and environmental ties. So in 2016, IWA released the Principles for Water-Wise Cities, and this is a framework to encourage resilient planning and design for more livable cities to address and face some of the pressures that I mentioned earlier. It's really a framework that brings together urban stakeholders around a shared vision, and it promotes transdisciplinary and integrated water resource management and planning. So the framework has 4 levels of action, and the one I'm going to focus on today is more about the connection between cities and their wider watersheds, so basin connected cities, but the 3 others are also very relevant. Regenerative water services, which looks at water and wastewater utilities, water sensitive urban design, which is at the city scale, and then water-wise communities, which are professionals and citizens. What can they do? So to give some context, basin connected cities, when I talk about that, I'm really talking about a system of systems. So, for example, sorry, it just went ahead a bit. So we can reuse water from urban and peri-urban areas in ecosystems and also in agriculture. Water efficiencies in agriculture can improve water supply to ecosystems and ensure water supply in urban areas. at the same time, increased water efficiencies might mean there's less black flow to ecosystems, so that has to be taken into account. Ecosystems provide services such as flood mitigation and groundwater recharge. And ecosystems also provide green infrastructure that can improve the quality of water by healthy watersheds or constructed or wetlands, and natural wetlands and constructed wetlands can help improve water quality, so less money is needed for chemicals, and then maybe less energy is needed for water treatment. Then urban and peri-urban areas and agriculture produce waste that can be potentially used for creating energy in the form of biogas. Ecosystem services can be used for reducing pollution, as I mentioned earlier, and also for carbon sequestration. So this showed examples of connections with the watersheds we rely on. So in this context, IWA in 2018 released the Action Agenda for Basin Connected Cities. And this builds on the principles for water-wise cities, but really looking at that third level. Thinking about how can we achieve water security within our watersheds in the coming decades, but also what can we do now? What can urban stakeholders do now to achieve sustainable management of basins into the future? And so why did IWA do this? Well, we have many leaders within the association, and it was an opportune time to encourage these leaders to champion the protection and management of water resources. And for the benefit of taking part in basin management, the city secures not only water, food, and energy resources, but it helps protect water quality and increases resilience to extreme events. So again, this agenda is a framework. It helps influence and activate utility cities and their industries to become water stewards working with basin stakeholders. And there's three parts to the action agenda. The first part is drivers for action. So this is like, why should a city be concerned and what's happening in their watershed? Well, first of all, extreme events. So floods and droughts could result in public health hazards. Declining water quality, as I've mentioned before, can increase operating costs because of increased energy and chemical use potentially. Changes in water availability can disrupt supply, which can have knock-on economic, environmental, and social impacts. The pathways for action are really like the core of the framework. And through assessment, planning, and implementation, these pathways can take place. And this is really where your research into water resources is essential to find solutions to address the drivers. So, for example, one of the pathways is investment in data information systems, research and expertise. Another is using digital technologies. Another is looking at risk management. So this kind of reflects some of the presentations that you'll hear today. And then finally, there's the foundations for action, and this is what you need to deliver sustainable water management, from developing a vision to building capacity to improving governance. So, okay, so we have these frameworks. So what? So how can you engage? Well, first of all, sharing your research and knowledge through different IWA channels, such as what you're doing today, but also through specialist groups, webinars, other events, and the IWA platform, IWA Connect. Sharing your case study. We're actually putting together a handbook of cases and best practices. So we're always looking for case studies. It could be a case study within a particular city or around a particular tool. And some of them we're going to put in the handbook, and we also showcase them on the IWA website. Another area is championing the principles for water-wise cities and working with those that have championed the principles to really think about this connection between cities and their watersheds, potentially using the action agenda. And then a final area which I am very grateful for YWP's contributing to is translation of the principles for water-wise cities and also the action agenda into other languages. YWPs have had a leading role in this area. So just a couple other things in around the young water professional context is that, well, young water professionals are a key pillar within IWA, and really IWA aims to empower young professionals to contribute to a water-wise world by creating connections and also providing professional development opportunities, as well as recognizing their inputs. And beyond what I have just mentioned in relation to the work that I've been doing, there are many opportunities within IWA for young water professionals to engage, such as through the chapters, participation in a group on IWA Connect, which is focusing on young water professionals, emerging water leader subcommittees on communications, events, and chapters, engagement in organizing committees, and connecting with senior professionals, including through online dialogues and affiliate programs. So this was just a snapshot of some of the work that I've been doing around water resource management and how the work that you do can contribute towards this. And I'd like to thank you for your attention, and we can always continue the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine. And thank you, Ryan, as well, for that introduction. And we are so grateful to the International Water Association, the IWA, for their support to E-fluence 2020, and indeed to all the programs of PIPE. And Catherine's message is very timely as a reminder that water management should indeed be integrated and cross-sectoral, and that young water professionals and emerging water leaders such as ourselves have a significant role in advancing holistic water management. So the researches that we're going to hear today are components of that system of systems, as Catherine rightfully describes, but we should not lose sight of the fact that we should look at the water sector on a holistic, big picture point of view. And I'd like to invite everyone to please access these resources for young water professionals from the IWA page. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact any of these contact persons you see on the screen, or reach out to the Philippine Young Water Professionals, and we'd be happy to help you start engaging with a global network of young water professionals. So thank you once again, Catherine. Let me just go back to the program, because now we're going to have a deep dive into the 4 research presentations that we have lined up for you in this part 1 of E-fluence. And our first speaker is John Christian Herrera of the De La Salle University. JC Herrera is an undergraduate civil engineering student from De La Salle University with specialization in hydraulics and water resources engineering. His undergraduate thesis is on the water balance with and without the application of low impact development, or LID, in San Juan City, Philippines, using stormwater management model. He presented his thesis in the 19th IWA International Conference on Diffuse Pollution and Eutrophication, or IWA DIPCON 2019, in Jeju, South Korea, and the first National Scientific Conference on Water, WATCON 2019, in the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. So please give a warm virtual round of applause for our first presenter, JC Herrera.
Hello.
JC.
Hello.
Hi there.
Okay. I'm gonna start sharing my screen.
Please.
How do I? Oh, share screen. There you go. Share screen. There you go. Is it clear? Is it visible? Hello. Is it good?
Yep,
all right.
We can see it now.
I'll be starting. All right. Firstly, I'd like to thank Catherine for those excellent points. I'm going to be using some of that points in my presentation, especially the idea that the battle will be lost in one on the cities, because I completely agree. That's actually what we're going to be talking about today. I'm JC Herrera. I'm going to be talking about my thesis on the water balance with and without the application of LID in San Juan City using stormwater water management model. We'll be getting into those specific terms in the subsequent slides. So firstly, we want to talk about the natural hydrologic cycle, or as we all know, the water cycle. The rain that we get from land is from precipitation or rainfall. And that rainfall eventually splits into three types. It either infiltrates into the soil, it runs off through the surface back to our surface water, or it evapotranspirates up into the atmosphere, and the cycle continues. Now, what we're going to be focusing here is the tackle. We're trying to tackle the problem of urbanization because it has disrupted that natural hydrology. Why is that? Because roads and buildings are impervious and water can't pass through them. Thus, the infiltration is completely blocked off. Now, it's not that roads and buildings are bad. We do need them, but we need to make our system holistic and to conform into our nature. And to do that, we want to, before that, the impact of urbanization is basically this. From natural ground cover, as we increase the number of roads and buildings, we increase the impervious surfaces. Our old infiltration when we had natural ground cover is around 50%, total of about 15%. In turn, because it's a water balance, it just comes and goes, the water just goes from infiltration to runoff, we also turn that 10% of runoff back to 55% once we're in an urbanized state, like Metro Manila. So what we're proposing is to basically mimic the natural hydrology. And to mimic the natural hydrology, we have to copy natural processes. So what we're trying to do now is from that infiltration of a low 15%, we want to get it as close to 50% again as possible. And in turn, possibly and surely decrease that runoff from 55 to 10. To do that, these are green infrastructure that we use into our existing systems. This is a type of system within the bigger system, as we mentioned before. It's a very good thing to add in sustainable urban planning because what we're doing now is we're using oversized pipes and flow control devices, these mechanical means over here in this corner, number 1, and we're letting that handle all the water management that we're basically experiencing when it rains. What we're doing is we're slowing down the water so we could manage it. We're doing flow control, detention, using detention tanks and such. But if we open up to the ideas of nature-based solutions like LID, we're going to be able to tap into more biological means of managing our water systems to supplement our oversized pipes and flow control devices. Instead of just slowing it down, we could spread and soak this water, possibly filtrating it, and eventually infiltrating it into the soil and possibly even treating the water. So that both hits the problem with quantity and quality of water. In this specific scenario, we'll be talking about the infiltration trench and the rain garden because those two over here in the 15 and 17, those two do focus on infiltration. Infiltration trench is a sort of device that has a media where it lets water accumulate and then seep into the soil. While rain gardens is sort of the same, but these aren't necessarily to replace these oversized pipes or flow control devices. They're there to supplement it. Instead of just completely letting our oversized pipes carry the loads of our water resources, we could split it into the infiltration trench, basically reducing the operational costs, supplementing their services. So what exactly are we trying to do here? In this specific study, we're trying to investigate the effect of applying these LIDs, infiltration type LIDs, into the water balance of urban catchment in San Juan City. To do that, we have to check the viability of the LID. How well does it work? And the second one is to develop a method with the available data. As you may know, here in the Philippines, our data is not as complete as compared to the first world countries, for example, like Korea, or the US, where this study is actually more dominant. So what we're gonna try to do here is with the designing and studying this further. You might be asking, why are we actually choosing San Juan? Well, that's because it's under the Philippine Clean Water Act of 2004. It's called a water quality management area, an area they designated for about like a focused area that we should clean because it does affect a bigger watershed, as we mentioned a while ago. the larger watershed is what we're trying to protect by protecting the city. In San Juan, in the San Juan River system, WACMA, we're basically gonna be cleaning up the San Juan River from the source, from the city itself, instead of cleaning it at the output point. So if you can see here, this is the San Juan River area of effect. It captures the water from San Juan and everything upstream, and eventually drains it down to Manila Bay. This effort, if we apply LIDs, is basically larger area into the Manila Bay, effectively cleaning it from the source. So this is our study site. This is San Juan City. It's actually within a bigger area called the San Juan Water Quality Management Area that does include Quezon City and Mandaluyong. But for this one, we're going to be focusing on San Juan City. In San Juan City, we chose two specific subcatchments, that being subcatchment 11, subcatchment 10. They're basically office buildings, parking lots, schools, factories, etc. Those are the kind of surfaces that we're going to be seeing. Our methods is quite simple. We gather the input data from Pag-asa, NAMRIA, local government units, rainfall data, topographic map, land use, and we use Google Earth. We input that data, we analyze it, we characterize the rainfall, we delineate using QGIS, we observe the land use, assigning runoff coefficients, etc. And we basically make it compatible for SWMM, the model. So we make it compatible for SWMM, we plug it in, and from there on, we get the infiltration, the runoff, and the storage. That will be the water balance of that specific scenario. So we got two rainfall gauges in our area. And in those two rainfall gauges, we basically got a 30-year total annual rainfall of 3,000, about 3,000, 2,700 millimeters. That's an important data because rainfall, if you design this in Korea, it would be a completely different rainfall. In fact, if you design it anywhere else in the Philippines, you would have a completely different rainfall as well because we have 4 climate types. So that matters when we're designing. When delineating, we got the topographic map. We run it into QGIS, got about 20 subcatchments. We delineated it using runoff coefficients. We got this from JICA, the design guidelines. And in modeling, we use 2 infiltration rates, infiltration rate A and hydrologic soil group A and D, with the highest and lowest infiltration rates of 1.63 and 0.6 inch per hour. So basically, when we created the scenarios, this is the scenario creation. We had different parameters per scenario. The first one is the catchment. There were 2 parameters, 10 and 11. The LID types, as I mentioned a while ago, the bioretention cell and the infiltration trench. The soil type being A and D, and the rainfall being 60th, 80th, and 90th percentile, which I'll explain later. So these are all the scenarios we made. That's 30 scenarios considering all of them, and 3 without the highlight. So this is the 90th, 80th, and 60th percentile rainfall that I explained a while ago. The cumulative frequency occurrence is basically the amount of rainfall that you could capture if you design your device to capture this much water. For example, we have a rainfall event that's 42.2 millimeter. If you design your device to capture 42.2 millimeters of rain, you will capture 90% of the rainfall events in that year. 90% of all the rainfall in that year will be captured by your device. The rest will probably overflow. The same goes with the 80th percent. The 23.5 millimeter rains, you will if you design it with that, you capture 80% of the rainfall. The same goes with 60. That's important because when we're designing LIDs, we want to keep it, you're not trying to capture storms. We're trying to capture the majority of rains. In normal rainfall, we don't want it to flood. So basically, we're just going to divert it into our device. We got all those data and we put it in SWMM. It does have a built-in LID control to simulate. And this is the findings that we got, the water balance. We had, within this slide are the 30 scenarios. These are the charts based on soil type. And this is the chart of all the numerical data. Dark blue means infiltration. Light blue means runoff, and the green is storage. Storage is basically the amount of water stored in the subsurface. So that's normally like about the same. But what does change and what does matter in this specific study is the infiltration and runoff. The first thing that you will observe is that without LID controls, you could see a significantly low infiltration rate. That's 8% in a 90th percentile rainfall. That's about 47 millimeters, or 42 a while ago. And that's 14 at an 80th percentile rainfall. Basically, it's lower than what we should expect. Hydrology, it's supposed to be about 50%, but this one's about closer to the 15% that we saw at a highly impervious city. So with we're going to be comparing the 90th percentile on the next one. In the 90th percentile, we're going to be comparing without LID controls over here with the two LID controls, bioretention cell and infiltration trench. You can see here that without the device, it's about an 8% infiltration. But with the bioretention cell, that goes from 8 to 48. That's a 500% increase in infiltration. That's more water that we're diverting away from the pipe, so it has less load to consider. And with an infiltration trench, it's even higher, up to a 60%. Comparing LID devices, the bioretention cell and the infiltration trench, we could see that the infiltration trench performs better when it comes to infiltrating, as it should, because infiltration trench are focused on infiltrating a larger amount of water compared to a bioretention cell. A bioretention cell, while it may infiltrate, is more focused on treating the water using the vegetation. So we should take that into consideration. Even though it has less infiltration, there is benefits in using a bioretention cell instead. Also, it's considerably aesthetic because of the vegetation. So to conclude, the study showed three things. One, there is a site sensitivity for LID. The variability of the climate, the soil type, the land use data, these are completely different based on the manual, are actually very sensitive. When you design them, you have to design them for that specific area that you're designing them for. You can't just get an LID from one place and just plug it in another. So studies and further research in the Philippines is actually quite important. There is significant infiltration with LID. The summary of water balances shows the significant increase, as we said a while ago over here. And because of the water balance that I explained a while ago, because of that significant infiltration, there is a corresponding reduction in surface runoff. The water balance shows this relationship. Now, this is actually a preliminary study in further delving into LID here in the Philippines. This is what we're doing to establish these kinds of study. What we're planning right now is we're planning to create pilot studies, and aside from that, basically just continuing the research, improving our data, honing it, making it better. Yes, so this is us now with our paved roads, buildings, impervious surfaces, and hopefully with the application of green infrastructure, green roofs, tree boxes, constructed wetlands, bioretention cells, infiltration trench, this may be us soon with our green infrastructures and LID. You can see that this one is the landscaping LID. LIDs are actually very aesthetic and functional. So it's a step closer to water security by applying these functional and aesthetic LIDs. A step towards water-wise cities. Thank you.
Thank you, JC. Thank you very much. What a way to start E-fluence 2020. And indeed, you touched on a number of very important topics on nature-based solution and urban stormwater management. And from stormwater management, let us move on to network pressure management for water utilities, network optimization. This will be presented by engineer Rafael King Ramos, who has been active in the field of water supply operations with Maynilad Water Services Incorporated for 10 years, where he has a water network, where he was a water network engineer in charge of supply and pressure management of a distribution network which covers 1.6 million customers. He's currently the head of Solutions Design Group in charge of formulating strategies in operational efficiency and technology adoption. He co-invented and developed a system, controller, and method for controlling supply of fluid in a distribution network, published in 2016 through the IPO Philippines. His area of interest includes human-centered design and data analytics. He's a graduate of civil engineering from the University of the Philippines in Diliman and has obtained certifications in entrepreneurship and management from the Asian Institute of Management and Ateneo Center for Continuing Education, respectively. For our second presentation, King.
Hi, thank you, Yang, for the introduction. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's clear. Okay. So, good day everyone, or as we say in Maynilad, maginhawang araw sa ating lahat. I hope all is well sa lahat ng nanonood sa atin ngayon. So, I will be presenting to you one of Maynilad's initiatives in improving our efficiency, and that is through optimizing the operation of our network through pressure management. Okay. So, please allow me to introduce first our company, Maynilad Water Services, Inc.
King, before moving forward, can you please share your screen so we can see your presentation?
Oh, sorry.
There you go. Thank you.
Ayan, sige. Okay.
Go ahead.
Actually, first slide pa lang naman. So, actually, Maynilad is the largest water concessionaire in the Philippines in terms of customer base. So, we provide water and wastewater solutions in Metro Manila. So, actually, Maynilad is just a roughly 13-year-old company. We started through the reprivatization of the west zone of Metro Manila in 2007. So, Maynilad is currently owned and operated by a consortium of Metro Pacific, DMCI, and Marubeni. Okay, so let me share also with you how we operate Maynilad from dam to tap through this illustration. Okay. First, raw water is collected through dams or other natural areas like lakes and watersheds. In the case of Metro Manila, 98% of our water comes from Angat Dam. And then from Angat Dam, water will go downstream to Ipo Dam, and then through a series of tunnels and aqueducts. 60% of that raw water will go to Maynilad's water treatment facilities. Now, through different processes in the treatment facility, impurities in water are removed to make it clean and potable. When we say potable, it means that water coming out of our treatment facility is safe to drink. Okay, so naiinom siya. To do that, controls are set in place to ensure that water that will be distributed downstream of the treatment facility will comply to PNSDW, or the Philippine National Standards for Drinking Water. Parameters like turbidity, presence of coliform, color, residual chlorine, etc. are measured by our chemists and engineers at different points within the plant and also in the distribution side. After removing water impurities, potable water will be delivered to our customers downstream through a complex network of water tanks, pipes, pump stations, and valves. As of the moment, just to give you an idea, if we lay all of the Maynilad pipes into a straight line, it could go as far as the distance between Manila and Melbourne in Australia. Okay, that's how long our pipe network is. In terms of diameter, it actually could serve as an underground highway because one sedan could fit inside our largest pipe. Okay, that's how large our pipes are. So, pressure in our network, one of the critical components in our operations, is maintained through changes in water levels in our water tanks. And for customers located on high areas and areas far from our treatment facility, we constructed local pump stations and water tanks so we can still provide enough pressure to their tap. Okay, so this system can be clustered into three components called the source, treatment, and distribution. This is typical for water utilities. Now, for my presentation, the focus mainly is on the optimization of supply and pressure in the distribution network. Okay? Prior to the new consortium, water supply availability and pressure are luxuries to our service area. In fact, we started with only around 60% coverage, and less than half of which had 24 hours of water supply. Also, one of the challenges is the high non-revenue water, or in short, NRW, primarily because of losses in the network caused by this. So this is an example of illegal water connections. The illegal water connections are installed in our pipe network. And then on the right side, okay, is an actual photo of showing connections which are illegally tapped in our primary line. So kung makita nyo yung parang maliliit na hose, no, nakakabit doon sa primary line. So malaking pipes to, large diameter pipes. No. This is challenging and problematic at different levels in our organization, especially from the standpoint of network operation. Okay? If we look at the cross-section of a pipe, we can see from this illustration that pressure pushes water towards the wall of the pipe. This changes depending on the operation of the source and depending also on the demand for that water, volume of water. So Maynilad pipelines are designed to a maximum of 150 psi, but normally pressure in our lines is around at least 16 psi. Okay. Going back to these photos, if you look closely to sa illegally tapped lines on the upper right, the workmanship is, if I'm going to rate it 0 out of 10, if that fails, and most of the time it will, there will be water losses. For this one, like for example on the lower left, ito yung example na may leaks sa primary lines. This one is in a way actually good for our NRW engineers because water leaks are easily spotted since it is above ground. But not all leaks are above ground, like this one in the photo. Okay, nasa underground yung leaks nito. Now, based on what I showed to you in the previous slide, pressure in pipeline plays a major role in managing these leaks and losses. Pressure is actually directly proportional to leakages. So if you have a high pressure, the volume of leaks is also high. So if you want a lower rate of leaks, you need to reduce your network pressure. Okay. And this strategy is actually described in a report in 2002 by Lambert. In this framework, actually this framework is actually being used up until now by most water utilities and even in Maynilad. The box in the middle, okay, the gray, darker shade of gray, represents recoverable losses, and the smaller box is the unavoidable annual real losses, or UARL in short. Of these 4 strategies, pressure management, speed and quality of repair, pipeline asset management, active leakage control. Of these 4, you may notice that only pressure management affects the increase of this box at the middle. You can see that the other strategies are one-way arrows. So pagka parang double-edged sword yung pressure management, it could help you decrease the leaks, or it could worsen yung NRW. Okay. But of these 4, pressure management is the fastest to implement kasi change in pressure lang siya, and in a way the most economical depending on the mode of your pressure control. But eventually we realize that there is a tension in our objectives in Maynilad. Looking closely in the distribution, so there is a source, and then there are pipelines and customers at the end of the line, and then there are leaks, okay, and then we have bulbs. So we say that we need lower pressure to reduce water losses in the network, and that is absolutely valid. Okay, so when we lower the pressure, the leaks will be reduced, but on the end of it, pressure also affects the volume of water that could be delivered to our customers. So pressure management affects both leaks and consumption, and actually, nandun yung tension, ano? So, considering the target to reduce leakages and the target to maintain sufficient pressure for customers' consumption, do we have a way to hit both? Okay. So, this tension actually inspired us to develop the pressure management program in Maynilad, the pressure optimization in our network. So the goal of this program is to find the sweet spot. So we need to lower pressure to reduce leaks, but not too low that it will affect consumption. Okay? There are 5 major steps in our program, but for this discussion, I will focus on the analysis part. I will show to you the workflow that could be used also by other water utilities on how to arrive on the optimum pressure considering both consumption and leakages. So, if you look into the context of data analytics, it covers actually yung descriptive analytics and yung the prescriptive part. Okay? So, at the minimum, your target area for pressure optimization should be isolated. This is commonly called DMAs or district metered areas. But the general idea is it has to be one inflow only. Okay. For the data requirement, you should have flow and pressure measurement, flow and pressure at the source, and in Maynilad, we normally have measurement at critical point. Okay. And then, by the way, critical point is a point in the influence area with the lowest pressure. So if you can satisfy the required pressure at the critical point, you are assured that pressure in all the points within the network is within the pressure requirement. This is usually at the highest location or at the location farthest from the source. For the pressure measurement, you could have as many pressure locations as possible because for the analysis, you will just need the average zone pressure. Okay. And then this is just the framework for the analysis. It's a 3-step flow process. No? So the first part, the objective is to identify the legitimate flow and leakages. So this is an example of the data gathered from one of our DMAs or one of our influence area. On the y-axis on the left is the pressure. This describes the pressure, and on the y-axis on the right describes the flow at the source. No? Basically the measurement of the inflow. And then you can see at the x-axis, no, it's an hourly data for the duration of the 24 hours. Okay, the blue line is the flow, and then the red and green are the pressure measurement. Okay, so as I've said, we need to identify legitimate flow and leakages on this area. So if we look at one strip of flow here, actually composed siya ng legitimate use and leakages. So the goal on this step is to identify which is which, or ano yung measure ng leakage and ano yung measure ng legitimate use. Okay? From the continuity equation, it's actually easy to get this if you have flow measurement in individual customers. You will just use this equation. So you will just subtract the sum of individual meters or individual measurement on all your customers. You will subtract that from the inflow measurement, and then you will get the leakage. But it is not yet economical as of the moment, at least for Maynilad, no? So we use a different technique called the night flow analysis. So the idea is, the premise there is that reading at night time is consistent, no? So ginagawa namin, we read flow during night time, and then we go back after 1 hour, 2 hours, and then we read, and then through that we will be able to identify the composition of that flow on that particular time. So we will arrive to this. So we'll have the actual leakage and then the legitimate flow. So through night flow analysis, we'll be able to arrive to estimate these estimates, and then And then once we have those estimates, we will now calculate for the composition for the rest of the hours of the day using the FABAD concept. Okay, so the simplified version of the equation is shown. So it shows that changes in pressure raised to the power N1 varies with change in leakages. So it was derived from the energy equation. So the velocity of a leak varies with the square root of pressure and the coefficient of discharge. But FABAD also recognizes that the effective area of some leakage paths, so yung dinadaanan mismo ng leaks, no, may vary with pressure. So that adjustment happens using N1. Okay, so just to illustrate, leaks on metal pipes normally have low N1 values compared to softer materials like plastic and HDPEs. This is because pressure also affects the nature of leaks in these materials. For example, for HDPE, lateral cracks expand as the pressure inside the pipe increases. So the higher the N1 value, the more sensitive existing leakage flow rates will be to changes in pressures. Okay? So FABAD actually is an acronym for fixed and variable area discharges. Okay? And then the goal for this first step is to create the leakage model such as this one on the right. Okay, so actually it's just a matter of plugging in values. No? So for this, we'll just use the actual leakage for L naught, and then we will get the average pressure, plug into P naught, then we'll get average zone pressure at time N, actually our target R, and then we will arrive to this chart on the right. So again, the goal for this first step is to create the leakage model such as this one. And then the next step is setting your target leakage. Okay. One way of setting this is by computing for the UARL. Okay. There are techniques to compute for this, but basically this is a function of the condition of the network, like level of pressure, length of mains, number of connections, etc. So this step is the simplest, but I could say that this is one of the most important part because this is usually anchored to the organizational objective of reducing NRW. Okay, so if you already identified the target level, you may now compute for the optimum pressure, which will be covered by the next step. Okay, so we will again, for this step, we will again use FABAD, okay, by estimating the leakages. So it's just a matter of plugging in. Okay, so for the target leakage, that will be the final L sub N, and then we will just use the baseline data for L naught, P naught, and N1. Again, N1 is depends on the materials or the nature of leaks on your network. Okay, but the target for every R can be computed using the percent NRW target. So for example, your target is 20% NRW. You will just multiply 20% by the supply for the particular R. Okay, so there will be case when your target leakage is higher than the estimated leakage, like this one on the right. Okay, this usually happens during peak hours. During this time, demand is higher, so the pressure is low. In effect, as described in one of my previous slides, lower pressure results to lower leakages. Okay, and then the output of this step should look like this. Okay, so on the y-axis, you'll see the flow, right? Flow, and then the line chart, you will see the target flow and the target leakages. Okay, as mentioned a while ago, it is normal for target leakages to be higher during high flow. It only means that your percent NRW during that time is lower than your target leakages, and then correspondingly, you will be able to compute for the pressure. So that's the more important part. We will be able to compute for the pressure given the constraints in legitimate use and leakages. Okay, So as you can see on the chart on the right, the optimized level of average zone pressure, there are times that the optimized level of average zone pressure is set to higher than the baseline. So this is actually the effect of the increase in the target leakage versus your baseline. Okay, and this because of the calculated optimized AZP will serve as the basis for control setting of your valves or set points of pump stations and water level in reservoir. Okay, and then also during the implementation, there are other factors considered, like for example, what's the minimum service level requirement on that particular influence area. There might be cases that the area needs higher than normal pressure, like for hospitals or for industrial areas. Okay, you need also to consider the capability to adjust pressure, then the pressure saturation, and then the condition of bulbs. Okay, because your setting could cause cavitation, and then you will also have to consider the seasonality component. Okay, and then the analysis when we started the pressure optimization is very mechanical, but through IoT devices we were able to semi-automate everything from data gathering to analysis to control to monitoring of the effects of the set point. So this diagram shows our simplified architecture. So on the leftmost, so we installed around 5,000 IoT devices scattered in our concession area. Then all the data were sent remotely to our server. And then during the analysis, our engineers can easily extract data from these servers, and the output will serve as the reference on how we should control our operations in the field. So again, there are lots of control modes here, like for pumps, it could be through pump stations or valve setting or other modes of control. Okay, so since 2007 our connections have increased by around 500,000, but through this optimum pressure management we're able to manage our supply efficiently. Together with other initiatives in our organizations, we're able to provide enough volume for the need of our customer, and at the same time reduce water losses in our network. So I could say that that's really an effective workflow that could help water utilities in managing supply and pressure. So that ends my presentation. Okay, so you can, if you have other questions related to water supply operations, my email is here. Okay, maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, King. It's fascinating how data-driven management can really lead us to smarter utility operations, and Maynilad is really leading in that aspect. Thank you once again. And before proceeding to our next speaker, I would like to invite our viewers on Facebook Live to please post your questions, comments on the chat so that we can raise them later during the synthesis and Q&A. For our next speaker, we would like to invite Marc Sinan Azotea. Engineer Marc Sinan Azotea, MSCEE, is currently working at the Department of Public Works and Highways Region 5 in the Philippines as an engineer, and is an Excellence Awardee for 2019 in the Quality Assurance and Hydrology Division. He's also teaching as a part-time assistant professor in the University of Santo Tomas, Legazpi. Master degree holder in Civil and Environmental Engineering at Kongju National University, South Korea, and was a recipient of the Brain Korea 21 Plus from 2015 to 2017, and Woojung Scholarship from 2016 to 2017. Engineer Azotea won Best Oral Presentation in 2016 and Best Poster Presentation in 2017, both from the Korean Society of Hazard Mitigation Conference. Marc Sinan, we'd love to see you on video at this point. There you go.
So, hi everyone.
Hi.
Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes, very clear.
Okay.
Please feel free to share your screen.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen for you. So can I start now, Mr. Yang?
Yes, please take it away.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone, and to our speakers. Thank you for the wonderful um, thoughts, and also to Ms. Cross, and to the organizers, and to everyone who is watching us in Facebook. So I will be stating my research masteral thesis entitled Comparative Visual Analysis of Philippines Local Flood Vulnerability Index. So I'll just squeeze it into four contents. So let's have introduction. So for the introduction, flood. We all know that flood is one of the major problems in the Philippines. And by definition, it is just the rising and overflowing of a body of water, especially on a dry land. It is actually synonymous to the word inundate or inundation, where, to put it in a simple term, it's just covering up or submerging land by water. So, as I have said a while ago, flood is one of the natural disasters. We have plenty of natural disasters in the world. One of which is earthquake. There is also volcanic eruption, tsunami, typhoon, and many more. So flood is very rampant in the Philippines. So the researchers, having thought of the problem, flood, wanted to tackle about flood vulnerability index. So for the flood vulnerability index, it is just an index-based methodology. It is actually a tool to assess the level of harm of a certain area. So it involves first the indicators. In the world, there are a lot. There are actually thousands of indicators. But since we're dealing with flood vulnerability index, so flood, the researchers collated or gathered a total of 252 indicators. But that's a big quantity. So we then again screened it, and we come up with a final indicator of 31. So this composed of four components: the social, economic, environmental, and physical. When for the social, it actually deals with the people, the awareness, the welfare, and for the economic, the GDPs, or how the economy grew for that certain area, the environmental and physical for the countermeasures. And lastly, the three factors for the separation of all the indicators for each need. So we have the exposure, susceptibility, and resilience. Exposure and susceptibility are directly proportional with vulnerability, while resilience is indirectly proportional. To put it in a simpler way, exposure and susceptibility increases vulnerability, while resilience decreases it. So we then go to the localized flood vulnerability, which is the main objective of this research. So the aim of the research is to obtain a comparative visual analysis of the flood vulnerability index in a localized scale in the Philippines. So it is in a smaller scale, and it is new in the Philippines when I have performed this. And it is recommended by many researchers because of the fact that it is more accurate and reliable. We already have one flood vulnerability index here in the Philippines, but it's on a river basin scale. So the research tackles about the 18 river basins of the Philippines and put it in an index from a scale of 0 to 1. But since it's on a larger scale, my advisor and professor wanted us to deduce or localize or put it on a smaller scale. That's why we made this kind of research. So in the Philippines, it is an archipelagic country wherein it has a lot of islands, 7,641 to be exact. Before it's 7,107. So it is actually prone to several natural disasters, and one of which is typhoons. an average of 19 to 20 typhoons hit the Philippines annually. But as you can see here, the research focuses on this certain area of the Philippines. It's in the Bicol region, and it's the province of Albay. So why province of Albay? Because out of the 19 to 20 total typhoons that hit the country, 3 to 5 typhoons hit this province, and it is 16 to 25% of the total, which is a big percentage. So Albay is comprised of 19 LGUs, or local government units, and we have 15 municipalities. As you can see on your screen, here are the 15 municipalities. And we also have 3 cities, which is the Legal City, Tabaco City, and the center, which is the Legazpi City. However, due to time constraints during my research before, we were only able to come up with 5 areas for the research of FDI. And that is first the Legazpi City, which has a total population of 196,632 and a land area of 153.70 kilometers squared. Bakakay, which has a total population of 68,906 and a land area of 122.13 kilometers squared. Kamalig, which has a total population of 66,904 and a total land area of 130.90 kilometers squared. Inubatan, a total population of 82,361 and land area of 244.46 kilometers squared. And finally, we have Maynilad, which is a total population of 24,707 and a land area of 107.4 kilometers squared. So these are the 5 areas that this research will be dealing with. So let us now go through the methodology. We have 7 steps. So the first step that we did was to gather information and analysis. So we collated journals that were published, books, theses, reports, and proceedings, just to collate and also summarize all the indicators that we will be needing to finish the flood vulnerability index. So second, we use the indicators. So we finalized indicators. As what I have said a while ago, there were originally 252 indicators, but we screened it out to 126. Unfortunately, this is still a very large quantity. So we based it on Saati's report that only at least, for example, for a component, at least a maximum of 9 in order to use the random consistency index table. On the latter part, I will show you the table. So through the interviews and as well as the coordinations with the experts and NDRRMC, NDRRMOs, the APSIMOs, and the government units or local government agencies here in the province of Albay, we've come up with the final indicators wherein you can see that for the social, we have 9 total, for exposure, 1 susceptibility, and 4 resilience. Economic, we have 9 again, 4, 1, and 4. Environmental, we have 303. Physical, 313, for a total of 31 indicators. So after which, we will be making the equation. For the equation, we use the dimensional analysis. Basically, the concept of dimensional analysis is just to check if the final output of your equation is unitless. So there are no more units on the end node. And the concept of FDI, which is the exposure and susceptibility, would be placed in the numerator and the resilience at the denominator. So this one is the concept, and here are all the list of the indicators. So the next step is, since we have already made the equations, we need to get the data and prepare it. So how do we do that? The researchers did interviews and surveys with the experts, professionals, agencies concerned, and also prepared a mock-up data, which is a summary of all the of all the needed information from 2006 to 2015. So we use a 10-year data, wherein it is already calibrated and verified using the first 5 years for calibration and the next 5 years for the verification. So the next step is weight allocation. So for the weight allocation, we're going to use the pairwise comparison method, which is an origin of the analytical hierarchy process, or the AHP, for the components and the indicators. So here is the intensity importance, or the numbers that the experts are going to place relative to the importance of each category or component or indicator. So for all the odd numbers, they are certain about the relations of each. For the even numbers, they are unsure or they need to compromise. And reciprocals are also valid. So let me show you an example of how we did the pairwise comparison method. So for example, we have a 4x4 matrix wherein the row is similar to the column for social, economic, environmental, and physical. And then you will see here that there is a diagonal having a value of 1. So for the upper triangle, these are the values that the experts have placed. And for the lower left triangle, this is just the reciprocal. For example, the 0.25 is 1 over economic 4. For environmental, it's 1 over 2. And for physical, it's 1 over 3. So that's the first step. So you need to sum this up and then normalize. So by normalizing, you just need to divide the values by the sum. So 1 over 2.08, 1 over 0.25 over 2.08. So here are the values. And if you sum it up, all will have a 1 value. So next is we have to get the critical weight. So how will you get the critical weight? The critical weight is just simply the average of the normalized value of each component. When I say component, it's the social, economic, environmental, and physical. So for that, you can get the critical weight. Next is to get the weighted sum. To get the weighted sum, you need to multiply the matrix of the criteria weight by the matrix of the criteria matrix. So this one is a 1x4 matrix by a 4x4 matrix. So in advanced mathematics, we have already done that. Or simply, if you want to use Excel, you could just put the equation E equals M mult, and then choose the sheet that you want to multiply. So if you obtain the weighted sum, you can get the consistency value. To obtain the consistency value, you just need to multiply the weighted sum by the inverse of the criteria weight, or, for example, 2.09 multiplied by 1 over 0.47. So after which, we need to get the average of the consistency value, and that would be our lambda. What is the lambda? It is going to be used for the consistency index, which has an equation of Ci is equal to lambda minus n over n minus 1. The n here is the number of the matrix. For example, here it's a 4x4, so the n value is 4. Now, we will be using the RCI, or the Random Consistency Index table, the one I mentioned previously. So from that table, based from Saate's research, the n value that is 4. So the constant value that we will be using to get RCI is 0.9. So that would be used for our consistency ratio. Why are we getting the consistency ratio? Because it would allow us, or it would tell us that our data is reliable and also good for use. However, there is a limit. If in case the criteria consistency ratio is greater than 0.1, then we cannot use it because it's still not good. Therefore, you need to go to the first step, wherein you will meet again with your experts and professionals. Then place again place again your importance, level of importance to your indicators or components. So next is establishing the FPI, wherein we will have the principle of FPI and standardized value. When we say standardized, it's a value or a scale of 0 to 1, and a qualitative category. It will, I will show you on the next slide, the qualitative category. So that's the standardization. So this is the generated formula for the total FDI for the components and their individual weights from the pairwise comparison. And here is the qualitative category, wherein if we get the value for the formula FDI total, if it shows a value of from the range of 0.02 to 0.25, then you will have a corresponding low vulnerability to flood state, and so on for other values that we will be getting. So the researchers developed a formula based from all the indicators that were chosen, and also applying the concept of exposure and susceptibility at the numerator and resilience at the denominator. So here are the 4 components alongside with the indicators. So the researchers checked the dimensional analysis or the unitless of this equation. So when the researchers checked it, all are dimensionless. So these are good for comparison and good for research. And finally, we will have or obtain the comparative radial analysis, both for the component, and for the overall. So now we go on with our results. So for the results, I just added up a simple example of the component criteria matrix. So a while ago, it doesn't show the consistency ratio, but here I will show you the consistency ratio. When we did this, the 4x4 matrix for the components, and then we normalize again with get the criteria weights, get the weighted sum, and consistency value. So this would be representing the lambda. So we use that at the consistency index. So 4.22 minus 2 over 4 minus 1, we have 0.07. And then check from the table of RCI or random consistency index. So 0.9. Then from that, we could already place the values into our equation for the consistency ratio. So 0.07 over 0.9. So the result is 0.083, which is less than 1, which means it's consistent, so it is acceptable for usage. Also, I've placed one example for one component. So here we have the 9x9 matrix for the social component. As you can see, there are 9 here. So we normalized 9 as well, but we averaged for the criteria weights and then multiply the matrix for the criteria weight and the criteria matrix. So we get the weighted sum. And then to get the consistency value, we multiply again the weighted sum by the inverse of the criteria weight. So just average again to get the lambda, and then use the equation for the consistency index. So lambda minus n over n minus 1. So 9.79 minus n minus 9 over 9 minus 1, you get 0.099. Then use the RCI table, wherein the n here is already 9. The previous one is 4. So 9, you will use 1.45. So get the equation for consistency ratio, 0.099 over 1.45. So you will get 0.068. So that is also less than 1.1. So which means it's okay to use it. So here is already one result that we've made. It's actually a behavioral trend of each area for each year for the entire area, for the 5 areas. So as you can see in the graph, the trend is actually decreasing. So the vulnerability through time is slowly decreasing, which means that the government, as well as the people, or the local government unit, as well as the people, are doing something to actually reduce our vulnerability in terms of flood. So this one is already the overall total FDI of the 5 areas. So their total is 0.578. So you can see here that the physical and environmental hit the highest among the 4 components. So if we are going to base the 0.578 value to the qualitative category a while ago that I showed you, it is on the range of 0.5 to 0.75, which is at the corresponding of highly vulnerable to flood state. So this shows also that the socioeconomic components are at the utmost priority, which is good because I think all researchers and all people will agree that the reason why we are doing the research is because we wanted to get the welfare, or prioritize first the welfare of the people and the safety as well. So here I will show you the individual flood vulnerability index values of each area. So for Legazpi, we have an FDI of 0.508. For Bakakay, we have FDI of 0.576. For Dinobatan, we have 0.632. And all, as you can see here, all are also highly vulnerable to both the physical and environmental components. And for the last two, we have for Kamalig, FDI is 0.521. Manito, which has a 0.655 value. So still, the physical and environmental are at its peak. So finally, here is the result of the comparative visual analysis of the components. I just compressed and compiled all the 5 areas with their 4 components. So as you can see, for the green and purple line, for the radial analysis, all are at the highest. While for the social, it's on a smaller value. Economic, there are a little spikes, but still it's not as high as compared to both the physical and environmental. So this one is the comparative radial analysis of the overall FDI values, the one that I have shown you a while ago pertaining to the individual FDIs of each area. So I just used one graph for the 5. So you can see the values again, 0.509 for Legazpi, 0.76 for Bakakay, 0.521 for Kamalig, 0.62 for Dinobatan, and 0.655 for Manito. Now, what can we conclude on this comparative analysis of, or having this kind of information about these 5 areas? Well, one, we can say that this study has already established a comparative radial analysis of flood vulnerability index and applied it on a local scale, 1 city and 4 municipalities that assess the extent of vulnerability into first, each area, which is the 5 areas, and second, the overall or the total FDI value. Also, among the 5 areas, Manito depicted the highest FDI value, which is 0.655, followed by Dinobatan, which is 6.32, then Bakakay with 0.576. Next is Kamalig, which has a value of 0.521. And finally, we have the central city, which is the Legazpi, with a value of 0.509. So based from the qualitative category with the range of 0 to 1, as shown before, all are actually on the range of 0.5 to 0.75, which is at the state of highly vulnerable to floods. Therefore, the results from this study would also help the policy and decision makers in making shrewd and sound decisions on how to use the government funds to its maximum potential and build a better and more resilient city or municipality. So if we are to see this state as a highly vulnerable to flood state, we could also tell our stakeholders, our government, as well as the people that we need to monitor everything, or we need to take into consideration everything, because we are still not safe. So we are still far from the first world countries. So I hope that a lot of us would continue doing research, because R&D is one of the best things that us Filipinos are good at. And also, I would like to take an end note. Local areas are just entities of their own. This study is just a mere representative of a specific area. So the vulnerability to flood at a smaller scale is not actually directly affecting a larger scale. When I say a larger scale, may it be on a provincial or a national level. However, if in case we can mitigate the vulnerability to flood, maybe there is a possibility that we could reduce a certain percentage of the national or provincial level of vulnerability. And also, I would just like to state again what Ms. Ross has said, and I quote, "The battle for sustainability will be lost or won in the cities." I would modify, just for the sake of my research, I would modify this statement. So I would say, the battle for vulnerability to flood will be lost or won both in the cities and municipalities. So with that, I end my presentation. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Marc.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I hope that the FBI will make its way into disaster risk preparedness strategies of our cities and municipalities soon. And again, we do depend on researchers such as yourselves to further this kind of work and make sure that it is included into policy and city planning. Thank you once again, Marc. And for our last speaker, but certainly not the least, for part one of E-fluence 2020, we would like to invite Eduardo Bornilla Jr., who attended his bachelor's degree in chemical engineering and master's degree in marine science in UP Diliman. As freelance environmental consultant, he has worked with the academe and several NGOs, most recently with USAID Surge project in various water quality management projects. Currently, he is attending the Master of Integrated Water Management at Griffith University in Brisbane, Australia, specializing in urban water. This paper that he will present was also presented at the 22nd International River Symposium last October 2019, also held at Brisbane. Welcome, Edward.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi.
Having some technical problem here right now. I'm trying to share my screen. Please give a moment.
Sure. Your video is also on blackout for some reason.
Okay. Quite an unfortunate timing. But before I share my slide, I think I'll have to say something about my presentation. This was an initiative back in 2015 when I was attending a course at the Environmental Science Institute in UP Diliman on water quality modeling. At that time, I was with the Pasig River Rehabilitation Commission, where I observed that during that time there's some minimal modeling tools or science-based tools that are being used to manage the Pasig River. So I have thought of this topic for my term paper, and so I collaborated with PRRC, and the result is this one, which as mentioned earlier, I presented at the International River Symposium here in
Hello, Edward. Edward's screen froze. Hello, Edward. There you go.
Okay, finally. So I hope you can see my slides now.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I'm not sure in which part of the intro I was cut, but basically this one is a work for my, it's a term paper for my Envy course in UP Diliman, which is about the development of a dissolved oxygen, biochemical oxygen demand, or what we call as the DO-BOD system dynamics model for a famous river system in the Philippines, the Pasig River, using STELLA. So we have encountered a lot of water quality models before using a variety of water quality parameters, but I selected dissolved oxygen and biochemical oxygen demand for several reasons. First, DO is an essential element supporting the aquatic life, and it provides the maximum information about the water quality conditions. So given the limited data in the Philippines, it's just vital or necessary for me to select dissolved oxygen as the main water quality parameter for this model. And I tried to couple it with biochemical oxygen demand, which is a measure of organic pollutant in the water. And this is the amount of dissolved oxygen needed to break down organic matter in the water. So in the case of Pasig River and Manila Bay as well, we have observed that seasonally we experience hypoxic conditions. So polluted aquatic systems lead to reduction of dissolved oxygen like PR and Manila Bay, and the further reduction to 2 to 3 milligrams per liter DO concentration leads to the hypoxic condition. Or worse, this can also lead to the anoxic condition, or 0 milligrams per liter DO, that results to altered breathing patterns and fish kills. So I have chosen the Pasig River system given my affiliation to the organization at that time. And we know the Pasig River as a famous river in the Philippines, a pollution hotspot with famous landmarks like the Napindan Floodgate, the Malacañang Palace, and the Guadalupe Bridge. And some people are not that aware that Pasig River is actually a coastal estuarine. They know only that it drains the National Capital Region through the Pasig River watershed, composed of several sub-watersheds, one of which was presented earlier by JC about San Juan, QMA. And also, this river system connects the Laguna Lake and the Manila Bay. And this river is famous for being declared as biologically dead back in the early 2000s. So good thing about the Pasig River is it is constantly monitored by the Pasig River Rehabilitation Commission, particularly the water quality data, where there are 14 established water quality monitoring stations since 2009. And on a monthly basis, they collect water samples for analysis of the DO 34 series of 1990 standards, and then the DO 2016-08 standards, which include now the nutrients like the nitrates and phosphate. So for this study, I will be focusing mainly on the Pasig River channel, using the water quality data from here, Napindan, Bangbang, down to Jones Bridge and Manila Bay. And I'd like to show the trend of the water quality results, particularly the dissolved oxygen and then the biochemical oxygen demand for the main channel, as well as two major tributaries. One, the Vargas Station in Marikina River, and the other one, Sevilla Station in San Juan River. So as you can see in this trend, as the water goes downstream, there's some increase in the annual average biochemical oxygen demand and the fluctuation on the dissolved oxygen. And comparing this to the water quality standards, where for type C water, which is suitable for fisheries, contact for creation, BOD has to be less than or equal to 7 milligrams per liter only, and the dissolved oxygen must be at least 5 milligrams per liter. But looking at the values in this table, or rather on the graph, you see that BOD exceeds far the standards, and that the dissolved oxygen at some water quality monitoring stations are below 5 milligrams per liter, or can be considered as hypoxic. So this modeling activity was decided based on a situation that this is an academic research, actually a term paper for my water quality modeling semester in IESM. And I developed this system dynamic model to understand the nonlinear behavior of surface water dissolved oxygen and biochemical oxygen demand over time as water moves downstream. The possible applications I thought of that time is to reconstruct pollution transport and identify the hypoxia hotspots along the river channel of Pasig River, and estimate the BOD load contribution of the Pasig River watershed to Manila Bay, which until now is still a hot topic given the Manila Bay mandamus, Supreme Court mandamus, to clean up and rehabilitate the Manila Bay. And lastly, I thought of estimating the daily allowable biochemical oxygen demand load from Pasig River tributaries to attain the Class C water standard, which is the main goal actually of the Pasig River Rehabilitation Commission. So how does a water quality model look like for a river system? Think of this specific portion or segment of a stream, wherein if you will see the blue lines on the left, with the dissolved oxygen concentration at 8 ppm, as an effluent is discharged to the river or to the channel, you will see that the level of the oxygen drops and the level of the concentration of biochemical oxygen demand increases. And there's this dynamic interaction between these two water quality parameters, where as the water moves downstream, dissolved oxygen sag until it reaches this minimum value. And due to the aeration, as the water moves, the dissolved oxygen gradually increases downstream and eventually decomposes the remaining biochemical oxygen demand introduced to the river channel. So I'd like to point out that aquatic hypoxia is actually a result of complex interactions of BOD and biochemical and physical processes. And that the water quality is a set of parameters that are mutually interrelated. So that's the reason behind this system dynamics model. And these processes can be coupled based on interrelation. So over the past century, these observations were transformed into mathematical equations. And now we have the so-called Streeter-Phelps model, which is the pioneering river water quality model, wherein it shows how dissolved oxygen is consumed to degrade biochemical oxygen demand in water. So it's a mathematical description on the decrease of DO concentration by the degradation of BOD along a stream, as you can see in this illustration. So I tried to make a conceptual diagram about the water quality parameters and some physical and biochemical processes that will affect the concentration of dissolved oxygen. So physically, surface dissolved oxygen can be increased by the reaeration coming from the atmospheric oxygen. However, inside the water column, this can be degraded by the presence of biochemical oxygen demand and will also be consumed during denitrification by the transformation of ammonium species to nitrate. So there are a lot of modeling equations, but for the purpose of this study, I tried to look into the simplified equations covering the BOD decay, the temperature correction, since the Streeter-Phelps was conducted, or the formula for the Streeter-Phelps utilized the reference temperature of 20 degrees centigrade, and then the oxygen deficit equation, the saturation equation of dissolved oxygen, the aeration coefficient, the denitrification, and so on. I based this from the paper of Jolankay, and the equations can explain the nonlinear DO and BOD interaction as water moves at a distance downstream. So at this point, you might wonder, what do I mean by this nonlinear DO and BOD interaction? Think of the population dynamics of, let's say, an area wherein a rabbit or a group of rabbits or population of rabbits are feeding on the grass. However, these rabbits are being eaten also by a pack of wolves. So the changes in the population density of the three species are a good example of what we call as the nonlinear system dynamic representation of the population changes. So I use that analogy also for this change in the DO and BOD for a water body or a stream. So if I represent all those equations I mentioned in a platform called STELLA, which is a system dynamics modeling platform, it will appear as this one, where you can see the dissolved oxygen model here in the middle is affected by the BOD decay, the reaeration, and the denitrification. But all these processes are affected by several factors. I'd like to emphasize, for one, the reaeration. The surface reaeration is actually affected by the depth and the velocity of the water. Whereas, on the right side, denitrification is affected by the concentration of the species NH4 ammonia, the nitrite, until oxygen is consumed to produce nitrate. So this is how I set up the model in the STELLA platform. And for the user interface, this is one of the good, best rather feature of the STELLA. Modeler can set up these interface wherein you can present the results in a graph or in a table like this one. You can adjust some parameters, like in this case, F, which is the factor of K2 or the reaeration constant over the temperature constant as presented on the table on the right, which varies, let's say, depending on the flow rate of the stream or river. And also, there are some sliders here, like for the river temperature, which I adjust depending on the season. Like for example, the temperature of water coming for Pasig River varies depending on the our seasonality and amount of rainfall. Lastly, here I have some knobs where I adjust the initial temperature, initial background BOD, or the value of existing BOD at the river channel, particularly that's a river segment, and also the present background dissolved oxygen, which will serve as the initial values for the modeling simulation. So the STELLA user interface has run and stop buttons, F value and temp sliders. The modeler who would like to also do or develop this kind of model can modify all of this. I also added the background DO and BOD knobs, which I did not find in some other modeling tools. And for visual representation, I added a graph and a table for the results. So if you can see here in the graph, you will see the oxygen subcurve in this red line, and then the BOD decay represented by the blue line. And the actual values are presented in every time step, which I chose, it's on a per day basis. So the actual concentration of DO and BOD after each day is presented also in this table. So I now go to the results, particularly the sensitivity analysis, which I think I introduced by JC in his first in the first presentation earlier. This is to identify the important parameters that affect the model results, particularly for the dissolved oxygen and biochemical oxygen demand. So sensitivity analysis is done by varying each of the parameters by a set of percentage. And another thing that I like about STELLA, although I'm not an endorser of it, STELLA modeling platform has a built-in parameter perturbation technique for sensitivity analysis. So if I change several parameters, like as you can see in these graphs, if I compare the sensitivity of dissolved oxygen to varying temperature, I will get this graph wherein it still follows the oxygen Sutton curve, but there are some values of temperature where dissolved oxygen will reach anoxia, or in some values of temperature, dissolved oxygen will reach hypoxia after 2.5 days. And other illustrations are the sensitivity of dissolved oxygen to the velocity, and also the sensitivity of dissolved oxygen to river depth. So for my sensitivity analysis, the parameters were set to 7 milligrams per liter dissolved oxygen, which is higher than the Class C standard, and then 15 milligrams per liter BOD, quite small, and 2.5 F, and 28 degrees water temperature. So I run the model 5 times for 10 days at different parameter with fixed increment, using the increment suggested by STELLA. And I got a result something like this for the BOD sensitivity to temperature using the parameters that I used. So what are my findings here? Dissolved oxygen sensitivity to temperature from 20 degrees to 32 degrees. Here, DO is sensitive at higher temperatures, and at higher temperatures, a certain portion of Pasig River can reach hypoxia and anoxia. And this has been validated when we had anoxic condition for Pasig River back in May 2015. Or if you, as some of you can recall, during that time, you can smell the dirty environment of the Pasig River, and the color of the river water is like silty. And so during that time, when we measured, the dissolved oxygen was actually anoxic, or 0 milligrams per liter, and there is not enough dissolved oxygen to decompose the pollutants, the organic pollutants in the Pasig, in that segment, thus the high DOD values. Another thing, dissolved oxygen sensitivity to depth. So it is sensitive where at shallower depth, the dissolved oxygen regenerates faster, which makes sense because there's the interaction between the surface water and then the atmosphere. Whereas for deeper parts, close to the bottom or near the sediments, the oxygen regeneration is quite negligible. Second, third rather, dissolved oxygen sensitivity to velocity, where I look at actual values 0.1 meters per second to 1.1 meters per second. I have seen that using STELLA, dissolved oxygen is highly sensitive, where a slight increase in velocity delays the oxygen regeneration. And lastly, BOD sensitivity to temperature. So I did not just test dissolved oxygen sensitivity against temperature. I tried also for BOD, since BOD concentration is also affected by temperature. I have seen that a slight increase in water temperature does not necessarily affect the rate of BOD decay. Because if we go back to the modeling equations I presented in the other slides, it is actually the presence of dissolved oxygen that affect the decomposition rate of biochemical oxygen demand. So I compared the results. I selected the Napindan station for my scenario building, comparing the dry season and the wet season using the following values or parameters. And for comparison, this is the result of the projected BOD and DO levels. So for dry season, in less than a day on your on the left, in less than a day, it is just probable for dissolved oxygen to reach anoxic levels as it moves downstream. And then the rate of decomposition of the biochemical oxygen demand, this blue line or graph, is low as compared to the wet season, where although at some points downstream, dissolved oxygen reached anoxic condition, it was able to regenerate its concentration enough to immediately decompose the biochemical oxygen demand present in the river segment. So anoxic condition is most probable during dry season at high temperature and slow river velocity. And dissolved oxygen can regenerate faster during wet season. So this particular model was conducted for a portion of river channel of Pasig River. But as you can see here in this slide, there are a lot of other tributaries draining into the main channel. There are actually 47. So for further development, which I wasn't able to do given the limited period for that semester, we can still conduct this segmentation, wherein the boundary conditions will be based on the distance of each confluence point from Laguna Lake. So using GIS, was able to measure the distance of this confluence point from Laguna Lake in terms of kilometer. And we can still perform this water quality modeling rather for Pasig River to complete the whole stretch of the river basin. So I'd like to move my screen. So the initial BOD and DO condition will be at the starting from the Laguna Lake at 0 kilometers or 0 kilometer. And after transport of X1 km for the first time step, simulated BOD and dissolved oxygen will be the new boundary conditions. So how does it work? For this one, if you will see LL and ULL for BOD naught and to BOD1, this portion of the river channel will be simulated by STELLA. And then by the end, whatever the concentration of BOD and DO will be mixed with C2 and QC2 as the new boundary condition for the next segment until we reach the 27 kilometers to Manila Bay. So general dilution equations will apply at the 21 confluence points until the water mass reaches the Manila Bay. So here's a simplified illustration. From Laguna Lake, we have S naught or the segment 1 as the initial segment, segment 1, segment 2, segment N until Manila Bay, where additional inputs from the tributaries will contribute to the changes in the concentration of dissolved oxygen and biochemical oxygen demand. Another future step for those who are interested to continue my project, which I am very much willing to support, calibration is also required to the model to fit a data set. So which data set from the water quality data? Since I did this in 2015, I just thought of considering 2016 and 2017 monthly water quality data to be used for calibration. And that, for validation, the comparison of the simulation results will use the 2018 actual data. Unfortunately, we don't have, I think, a complete 2019 water quality data for Pasig River given the disestablishment of the commission a week after I presented this last year. So if I will represent all these model segments to a simple graph, the sample output will look like this, where the DO and BOD level from 0 kilometer up to, let's say, 27 kilometer is represented by these graphs. So using this table, we will see where exactly in Pasig River can we experience hypoxic or anoxic condition, and where, or rather what tributary contributes the high volume of biochemical oxygen demand, and where in Pasig River. So there, of course, I experienced a lot of challenges in doing this. Particularly, Pasig River is tidally influenced. The assumption for my model is that there is no tidal influence by the changes in the water level of Manila Bay and Laguna Lake. And another thing is the consistency and availability of water quality data, which I highly depended on from Pasig River Rehabilitation Commission. And there was also some limited hydrologic data where for the cross-sectional area of Pasig River, the latest data is dated on September 2009 after NAMRIA had conducted the bathymetric survey after Typhoon Ondoy. And this was not yet updated. And also my technical skills as a modeler or the modeler users. So simply put, I wasn't able to finish this. But I see some opportunities here that this can still be a science-based tool for managing the Pasig River. For example, where in Pasig River will we do the dredging and when is the best time to do it? Where can we put some water quality management projects to improve dissolved oxygen and reduce significantly the volume of BOD prior to its discharge to Manila Bay, and so on. And this is also replicable to other river systems. So before I end my presentation, I'd like to say that it is possible to develop a simple model to help us understand the dynamics of our river system, particularly for this case, the water quality parameters, dissolved oxygen, and biochemical oxygen demand. So with this, I'd like to thank my professor and boss from UP and PRRC, also the Young Water Professionals and International River Foundation, where I presented, or rather sponsored my presentation last year here in Brisbane. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Edward. And your piece of research is close to my heart because not only because I also have done some water quality monitoring work for Laguna Lake, and we were looking to do that for Pasig River as well. But also because I live right next to the Pasig River, and looking outside, it can look clear on a very good day, but as you mentioned, you never know when DO-BOD can be off the charts in any given season. I'd like to thank all, at this point, our speakers for the first E-fluence 2020. That concludes the panel of presentations. Once again, JC Herrera, King Ramos, Marc Azotea, and Edward Bornilla. And to help us synthesize the presentations and raise further questions on the researches presented, I'd like to invite Engineer Melvin Solomon, the Director for Training and Development for PIPE. Melvin is a civil engineer specializing in water resources, hydrology, hydraulics, and atmospheric processes. He earned his BS Civil Engineering from University of the Philippines, Los Baños in 2004, and ME Civil Engineering from the University of Tokyo in 2011. His career affiliation for the past 15 years includes Manila Water Company, GHD Manila, UP Los Baños, and Woodfields Consultants. Now he is currently affiliated with Far Eastern University as assistant professor and full-time online sensation. Melvin, over to you.
Thank you, Yang. So anyway, thank you very much for all the presentations. Am I heard clearly then by everyone?
Yes.
So I'm here to synthesize everything. So what I have captured here is that for the first speaker, I think hydrology is all about the movement of water, and the urbanization somehow altered the space and gave us some chaos. But things will happen naturally, so our response will just to shape our own set of experiences. So in that case, heavy rainfall is somehow unstoppable and causes flood. And the effect is undesirable to our lives. So the concept of LID, or low impact development, came around to manage the urban problems that our society created. So the study showed a big impact, and it best explained by significant improvement of the infiltration results. So I guess scaling this to a bigger arena will surely have a huge impact to our city life. So for the next speaker is about the pressure. So I guess the water supply distribution is essential to our needs, commercially, industrially, and in our houses. However, the water supply is finite, so it should be conserved and used wisely. But the water utilities have KPIs and BEMs to manage. So KPI is the performance indicators, BEMs are the efficiency measures, and they have to be regulated as scorecards like a grading sheet for rewards and penalties. So in that study, optimization of pressure is considered and provided a decrease in NRW and showed significant decrease, 27%, and a bonus increase in bill volume. That makes Maynilad very happy indeed. So for the third one is all about the flood index by Marc, and I captured that flood has been bugging our routine every now and then. So the least that we can do is to prepare with reliable numbers. However, the numbers are not invented, so it must be patterned from reality, and that is what we call management. So one way to do that is to assign an index as indicator for vulnerability. And in this case, similar studies can be used, and the results can help our city managers and like the government can do it so well. And then the impact when translated across the economy, environment, and social systems, it can be useful enough for us. Hence, a better quality of life for everyone is achievable. And then finally, from Edward, the water ecosystem is essential to our lives, and its quality can tell us if we do things collectively right to improve or improvement is still necessary. So essentially, the DO or dissolved oxygen is used by the organisms to sustain life, just like us humans are all breathing. And then BOD is the biological oxygen demand. That is the level that tells us how much more oxygen is needed to at least support life in water. So basically, higher demand, higher BOD means the water quality is bad and obviously needs improvement. So his study using the model of Slither and STELLA software is promising, and the study has initial results, and it was able to characterize water quality and the mechanics of Pasig River performance very well, with future calibration and validation works ahead. So I think everything really captures what is the goal of the Philippine young water professional as a driver for innovation and ideas to make everything sustained. So anyway, I have some questions captured here. So let's start with, shall we go with the questions, Yang?
Please go ahead, Melvin. Let us know who the question is for. And then for the panelists, the researchers, if you are called, please go on video again and unmute yourself to answer.
Okay, the first one is for JC. Are you? So the question is, in treating wastewater, what are the byproducts and where are the disposal area for the impurities extracted from it? JC?
JC, are you there? Can you please take yourself off mute? And if you can, also go on video so we can see you again. Okay, having internet connections. Melvin, maybe we could move on to... Okay.
Hi.
JC,
Hello,
can hear you.
JC. Again,
hello?
Hi.
There you go.
JC.
Go ahead.
Yes, please.
Okay, the question again is, in treating the wastewater...
Hello? Hello?
Hi.
Yes?
So in the treatment of... what are the byproducts? And where could be the possible disposal area for the impurities extracted?
Okay. My bandwidth is a bit low, so I can't particularly hear the entire question, but I think I captured like most of it. So you're asking where, what are the pollutants that we're capturing and how are we disposing of them, I assume?
Yes.
Hello? Oh my God. Yes, all right. So, well, that really depends on the specific type of LID or the specific design. Now, I hope I'm recording clearly, but that really depends on the specific design that we're using. Now, because we're only initializing or establishing it in the Philippines, other countries actually use different vegetations or different media to filter the water. So until we actually design specific LIDs, we can't particularly tell. What we do know is that we can capture the water and that we can filter it or treat it. Examples of the things that we could treat are heavy metals, and such, heavy metals and such. So yes, we can't say anything specific until we actually create a pilot LID. All we know is that we could capture it and treat it. Yes.
Okay, that's good. Anyway, the next question is that what is your comment about reconciling the LID movement with our current situation, for example, Metro Manila? I mean, how realistic would that be?
The thing about LIDs, the thing I love about LIDs is that they're very flexible, and it takes a lot of brain to design it to a specific scenario. You have to consider all the parameters. You have to consider where you're going to put it, what building, what kind of pollutant it's going to catch. So when it comes to how do we apply it in Metro Manila, we just have to find the opening. We just have to find what areas we could use and try to capture a large area, divert it into this device, and then it does its job from there. So it's all about looking for specific places that we should focus on. And the thing about LIDs is they're not actually a large scale thing. They're very small scale. We put instead of putting one big LED in a specific area, we actually put a lot. So we could capture multiple small areas, managing the water resources from the source. As the land falls, we don't have to let it flow from a very far distance. It immediately tries to go to the LID. So if you're gonna talk about how to put it in Metro Manila, well, it's all about space management. It's all about sustainable urban planning, and that's just it. And budget, of course. Yeah.
Okay, let us just hope for the meantime and see if the promise of LID will be realized soon. And there. And then for the next question is for King. Thank you, JC. Okay, for King, so I would like to ask is, how is your study manage the commercial losses? So while it is pressure driven, or how much is its coverage in the results?
Okay, for the commercial use.
Commercial NRW
Consumption.
or commercial.
So is it commercial use or commercial NRW? For the use, actually it's not considered there, but for the commercial NRW pertains to the, for example, accuracy in meters and so on. So this particular study focused only on the reduction of physical losses.
Okay.
Not commercial loss.
But do you have any idea or how much is the ratio between the physical and commercial
Currently,
in your study area?
I think it's around 80-20. 80% for the physical and 20 for commercial.
Okay. Okay. I mean, that's good. At least it's more heavy on the physical one.
Right.
Okay. And then the following question is, how about some sort of training if ever some of our audience is interested? So how would you sell the idea so that they do similar steps?
Is it for me?
For you.
Okay. So actually, we're doing learning sessions together with Maynilad Water Academy. So nag-start siya around, not sure kung 2015, 2016, but it's covered on our basic water course, but through Maynilad Water Academy, and then they tap us as their resource person. But may programa through Maynilad Water Academy.
Okay. At least there is an opportunity for anyone, or including myself. I think it's one of my frustration when I was with Manila Water to manage NIW back then. Anyway, it's good to
Challenging
have that.
talaga yan.
I see. Anyway, so thank you, King. And then next is the question for Marc, Sinan. So can you give some policies in mitigating flood vulnerability in our cities based from your results, or based on your initial results? So for example, prioritizing social welfare and other factors. So can you recommend some policies?
Well, actually, for this type of research, there are actually 4 components. So the one that she states is for social awareness. There are also other aspects that we need to consider. For example, the economic side, the physical and environmental as well. So from the data from the results that came out of our research, alongside with me and my professor and my advisor, the actual value for the social and economics are a little lower compared to the physical and environmental. But if she wants, I can also give a policy or a recommendation for social and economic as well. So for the social, I think we really have to update our consensus or the population growth, population density, and it's the job of our PSA or the Philippine Statistics Authority. But I think we should start on the barangay or the local level. We should update and know the current numbers that we are dealing with as of today, so that we could continually monitor if in case there are a lot of people that are going to be vulnerable to floods or other natural disasters. So I think that's one of the policies that or the recommendations that I could give to her. And also one more is how to educate and also inform under the local areas. I think because in a lower scale or in the barangays or cities or municipalities, there are still a lot of people that are untouched or not yet reached by information. So I think we need to try to reach out more. And I hope there are a lot of manpower to do that kind of suggestion. And also, for example, for the economic side or the land use, like how many percentage have already been used, for example, for commercial, for agricultural, for residential, because that would actually impact, like, for example, for Mr. JC's report, urbanized areas all are already paved. So the water is already difficult to infiltrate underground. So it's the runoff is very big. So the tendency is that there's no more passageway for the water to actually go down and not saturate the land. So I think the LID is also a good thing. And actually, I don't think, I know that LID is a good thing because I have also worked with her professor, Dr. Marla. So yeah, a shout out to her, Dr. Marla. Yeah. And also for the physical, I think it's more of the countermeasures that the local government units or the cities or municipalities has to do, like how they could build, for example, if they are already capable of building dams or bridges or pathways like dikes and levees, just to ease up the flow of water, since a city is already a paved or urbanized area. So we have to do some certain kind of countermeasures just to mitigate or reduce the vulnerability to flood. And as well as actually for the environmental, because these two components, the physical and environmental, are the most dangerous one. For the environmental, we know that it's more of the environment, it's Mother Nature that we are talking about. So we can't actually control her, but we can actually try to save ourselves from her wrath. Like we could, since we have already gathered data from Pag-asa regarding the rainfall, the intensities, the frequency of occurrences, I think we could actually plot and also foresee how can we dodge the bullet that Mother Nature can give us. So for the question regarding those things, I think those are the recommendations and policies that maybe can help her city or the other cities, because I think that there is a uniqueness on all areas. I think for our city, it may be different. The values may be different from their city depending on the availability of their data, as well as the motivations and perseverance of gathering the information or the required information or data that a certain city or municipality has. Yes.
Yeah, at least good that translation to policy is always a possible thing. But
Yes.
anyway, to get it started, in terms of communicating the results, so how do the mayor of Bakakay or Kamalig and Legazpi entertain your results? Or is there a form of support that they gave, or maybe indication of policy adoption or even budget?
Well, certainly there is no budget that was given to me because I don't accept money. But kidding aside, yeah, I'm just kidding. Well, I have actually, during my data collection and analysis that time, I was actually brought or directed to the MDRRMOs, like the Municipality Disaster Risk Reduction Management Offices, or the APSEMO for the Legazpi. It's the Albay Public Safety and Environment and Emergency Management Office. So I have not actually made a very close contact with the city governors, the mayors per se. Yes, I was actually directed to those who are actually directly managing and updating the data. So the MDRRMC and MDRRMOs, the city planning office for the land developments or land use, and for the projects. I've also had an encounter with several barangays just to check the consensus. So actually, I was accompanied by my parents to actually go into the smaller barangays just to actually count, manually count the consensus and actually tally it up to the municipality or city state.
Okay, it seems very hard. The study is really hard to
you need a lot
to
of
implement
patience.
and then doc it. It's done. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for that wonderful answer, Mark. So hopefully the mayor will hear it from you live. Anyway, let's go to Edward. So the question for Edward is, other than the parameters you've considered in your modeling, so what do you think is the highest contributor for the decrease in DOD in Pasig River or elsewhere in the Philippines?
Like
Edward?
I want to say thank you for that wonderful question. Wonderful.
Yes.
I'm wondering what my answer will be. No, just kidding. There, water quality parameters is a set of parameters influenced by various, let's say, pollutants, may it be solid, liquid, or ano pa ba? Collectively, the water quality parameters is just a representation of the overall health of the water body. So, paulit ng question, Prof, please.
Sige. What other than those parameters you considered, so what do you think is the highest contributor to the increase of BOD?
Okay. We tried to look at the BOD loading study of Laguna Lake Development Authority back in 2013. Factors include yung household discharge, especially those without septic tanks or are not connected to the sewer lines of Maynilad and Manila Water. Some other contributors ng BOD come from fisheries, like the feeds that decompose sa sediments. Other than that, even the sediments from stormwater discharge carry a lot of BOD. However, to answer that question, I think there's not enough evidence or data collected to account to which major pollutant or major, let's say, contributor to BOD ang ma-associate natin with the increase. So wala tayong enough na basis, wala tayong data for that.
Okay. But anyway, if you have your hypothesis naman, so you mentioned there are hotspots.
Yes.
So where are they exactly along the river?
If I base that, if I compare some historical data, previously we can say that the major contributor actually are the factories. Back in the 90s, back in the 80s. And then when they were moved to the nearby provinces, what became a little more evident is that household waste become the major contributor. And then there's also some commercial establishments still discharging. Now, with regards to the hotspot, based on our data, it's the San Juan River system that contributes most of the DOD to the Pasig River. Followed by the esteros near the Manila area, like Estero de Binondo, Estero de la Reina, and Estero de Paco. They're also contributors to the BOD. The problem with Pasig River, since this is tidally influenced, when the level of Laguna Lake is lower compared to the level of Manila Bay during high tide, this hotspot can be distributed all across the river system. Nadadamay na yung Napindan, even the Marikina River. So, given that, kung titingnan natin, the hotspot will be from San Juan downstream. But depending on the season, especially during dry season, we can say that the whole Pasig River is actually a hotspot of pollution.
So it's a hot river. Anyway, final question is, if you are the river manager, so what are the sequential steps that your study could offer, since our government projects are implemented by stages or by phase, and since money is always an issue?
I'd like to use the concept of urban water management, the principles basically. When I was reviewing management program ng Pasig River Rehabilitation Commission, I noticed that the jurisdiction of PRRC does not follow yung whole river system of Pasig River. So I think the very first step is that we have to delineate which is the Pasig River system area through GIS or other tools. So we can say at which point in Metro Manila and even the nearby provinces drain into the Pasig River. From there, we know which will be the water quality management area. We do not just focus on, let's say, tributary 1, rehabilitate. We are able to create linear parks and then transfer to tributary 2, tributary 3. We have to trace the whole watershed of the Pasig River, which is very challenging given that drainage network systems can be traced up to provinces like Laguna, Rizal, and that means also the water draining from those provinces go directly to Pasig River, not just Metro Manila. So I think that's the very first step that we need to do. And from there on, we can, let's say, start doing some management upstream, downstream. So a lot of possible ways can be done depending on the water quality test results that we see. For example, those areas near Napindan, they almost comply to the Class C standards. So probably monitoring and some other activities to reduce the pollution load will be enough as compared to those areas near the esteros in Manila, in Makati, in San Juan. So a lot of things can be considered. Sometimes we do some trial and error, but given that we have limited budget, it's really good that we have some decision support system tools to use para we do not spend the government's money sa mga project that will fail.
Anyway, my impression is that the initial step is really highly institutional reform. Am I right? So I guess just to make everything rolling, right, Edward?
I could say, especially now that the PRRC is disestablished and I think the power to manage the Pasig River is transferred to DNR, hopefully they can restart or reboot and look at the whole Pasig River basin, not just the areas that were previously managed by PRRC. Baka from then, makita natin that some significant improvement will take place in the years to come, following the same management practices of PRRC and a few more.
Anyway, thank you, Edward, for the answers. And then for all the speakers, thank you very much for your time. It's personally, I learned something new. I was refreshed of the ideas on how to really manage the water. So thank you for JC for the LID concept. It's really a good idea, way forward. And then for the pressure management by King, it's really database. So it's really promising to manage and just to make significant results with the savings in water. And also for flood, it's a good way that we have numbers to assign and let all the numbers speak for itself. And then the river quality is really highly, as presented earlier, it's really highly institutional as from Edward's perspectives, just to make everything go into place. So I guess that's everything about the discussions about this first E-fluence 2020. So again, thank you very much. So Yang, so hello, Yang.
Thank you very much, Melvin, for leading that synthesis and very rousing Q&A session. Once again to our speakers, JC, Marc, King, and Edward. A virtual round of applause for our panel of presenters for E-fluence 2020 Part 1. At this point, I would like to invite the chairperson of the Philippine Young Water Professionals, who is also the Environment and Safety Manager for Jollibee Worldwide Services, to deliver his closing remarks, Mr. Engineer Chris Katangkatang.
Thank you, Yang. First of all, I will on behalf of Pipe, I would like.
Chris, I think we lost your audio.
Hello.
There you go. Yes, we can hear you now. Oops, we lost you again. Couldn't
Hello?
hear you. Yes, there you go.
Hello. Okay. First of all, I would like to thank our speakers for today on behalf of Pipe. So thank you, JC, Marc, Edward, and King for taking the time to share your learning or sharing your experience on the water industry with our fellow members in Pipe and also the other viewers who joined us this afternoon. It's very refreshing to know that even though the presentations are technical, it's actually something that is applicable in real life situations and something that has value, especially to the environment. So with that, I would like to thank the speakers and also to the organizers for of this event. So our head for international international community, Ryan De Soto, and then our Rafael and Melvin, Yang, and Edward, and the rest of the Pipe officers for helping in putting up this virtual conference. So I know it's difficult given the situation of the COVID-19, but hopefully with this E-fluence, we are able to continue in updating our knowledge or what we know on the water industry. So with that, I'd also like to invite all those who are watching this E-fluence to join. This is only just part one, so we're still looking to have more sessions of this E-fluence, because I know there were submissions that were unfortunately not included in this one, but I'm sure there are also they are very willing to share their experiences on this one. And then also would like to invite everyone to tune in to Pipe is now going to make videos in TikTok. So we're going to join the platform of TikTok, learn TikTok in partnership with Phil-Sci Hub. So hopefully you stay tuned for that one. And then finally, we will also soon send out a call for speakers among members for the next webinar with we are in partnership with Phil-Sci Hub. So they are a group of teachers on the STEM track. So please watch out for that one. So with that, thank you again for all the participants and the presenters and the organizers as well. So back to you, Yang.
Thank you so much, Chris. And with that, I would like to thank everyone who's been part of the part one of E-fluence 2020, the first virtual conference on water and wastewater by the Philippine Young Water Professionals. This is not the end of E-fluence, because we have part two coming up next Saturday at the same time. And as you have seen in the past 2.5 hours, we do cover a lot in such a short time, and we don't waste time, even though we are all quarantined in our houses, in our homes, and hopefully we stay that way safely for the rest of the week. Once again, thank you for tuning in and spending your time with us. Thank you to all our speakers, to the IWA, Catherine Cross, and to all the organizers of E-fluence 2020. Please keep in touch with Pipe through our Facebook page, and we'll see you next week for part two of E-fluence. Bye for now.